I think the failure of the American left is due to two crucial mistakes. The first is that it's not our job to achieve formal political power. It's our job to stand fast with a moral imperative in the way that all the great reformers in society did. And most of them began as very isolated, marginal, and often ridiculed figures. And I think the second mistake is to succumb to a kind of practicality whereby we judge the efforts that we make in the fight for justice by what we see around us. And this is the strength of the religious left, figures like Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King, is that we have to, I think, finally find within us the strength of the faith to believe that what we are doing, while it may not transform society or the world in our lifetime, nevertheless has a kind of a power that often we don't recognize in the moment. I spent almost 2 decades as a war correspondent, and I watched figures stand up in El Salvador, Oscar Romero being one, or in the Balkans, and the ability, even for a sole individual, to express another way of being, to nurture a community. In the wars in Yugoslavia, when they began, the first people killed were not the opposing warlord or leader of the other ethnic group, but that within your own community who still had Muslim friends or Croat friends or Serb friends, who defied that narrative of hate. And the situation that we face is very bleak. We lack the tools to disrupt the rape of the nation by the corporate state. Labor unions are a spent force. Our political system has become, I think, as Sheldon Woolen correctly points out, a system of inverted totalitarianism. Our press, certainly our responsible print press, is dying. Resistance in many ways will be local. And I think that we'll have to find sustenance in a belief that no matter how bleak it gets, that act of resistance, that ability to retain our integrity, is in and of itself a victory. During the war in the Balkans, where there were horrific acts of genocide, I and other journalists, at some risk, would walk into towns where the Serbs had carried out massacres, whether in Kosovo or whether in Bosnia. They would cut the roads. We'd have to go in the back way with our satellite phones, report on what had happened, and file those stories. Certainly, it didn't stop them from carrying out a massacre the next day. But each act like that, each act that broke from the abstract sort of despair that comes with viewing the genocide at large, was one that I think empowered us to go from one day to the next. And no act of resistance is futile. It's when you give in to cynicism or when you give in to despair that you die. You die morally, you die spiritually. I think the great writers of spiritualism are not those sort of self-help gurus and the narcissism of how is it with us, but people like King or Bonhoeffer, who knew that true spirituality came with that eternal battle for justice.
Thank you, Chris. The ability to retain our own